Yo, welcome back, theorists. It's your man CJ Williams, and I speak for the entire CT fam when I say we missed you. With that being said, we got something extra special in the works today. Probably our most requested episode to date. Widely recognized as hip-hop's first solo superstar, James Todd Smith, aka LL Cool J, would revolutionize hip-hop in ways that can still be seen and heard in today's music. We're here today to see if that reputation was well deserved. Now, before we get things started though, relax, kick your feet up. Make sure you like that like button and love the super thanks during this season of giving. With that out the way, let's get to it. Number 13. Exit 13. If you asked us to describe L's 12th studio release, exit would be one word for it. Departure would probably be more fitting though. We want to compare this project to Shaq's Celtic days, but at least Shaq had a legitimate reason to think he'd get a ring out of that situation. Whether crafted from label pressures and expectations, or the ever-present need to be embraced by the community, Smith's last Def Jam release struggles so mightily because unlike any other release in his discography, this one lacks the hit-making ambition of his early 2000s work and the quality control of his 90s output. The harder L tried to cling to relevance while adapting to an incompatible era of music, the weaker the confidence in his music became. With haphazard production, poorly selected features, and incoherent themes throughout the album, rather than growing with his music, audiences are left feeling like they're hearing a living legend stumbling through a midlife crisis. So while we admire Uncle L's hustle in finding something to love about more time-specific trends, that kind of influence always sounds the worst when we're hearing it come from artists we've associated with being trendsetters. Number 12, Authentic. Reuniting with track masters, some would say 10 years too late, Cool J implores a more rock-heavy, Eminem and Rick Rubin-esque sound with joints like We're the Greatest and What Up. Rarefied air, even by today's standards, his 13th studio album matches Hov's count despite not releasing music in over 10 years. It's also worth noting this would be his first outing without the backing of Def Jam. It should go without saying that any album with room set aside for the likes of Eminem, Van Halen, and Brad Paisley probably shouldn't involve Charlie Wilson, Earth, Wind & Fire, or Monica. We don't make the rules, we just enforce them. The peculiar cast of characters keeps growing, however. In addition to multiple appearances from Snoop, no, they're not as electrifying as You Can't Fuck With Me, we also get a Seal-featured Bootsy Collins vocals and Travis Barker drums. Keep in mind, all these names as standalone artists would instantly have us checking for the song if it dropped on Apple Music right now, but putting said artist on the same project sounds and feels like an attempt to inflate We Are the World 25 into a full-length LP. Easily his most panned record to date, we would not look at you sideways if this one was collecting dust at the bottom of your rankings. But if you feel the need to listen to the project no matter what, we'd at least recommend focusing on the outro first and give tracks 3 to 6 a try, if you're over the age of 45. Don't worry, we're almost to the serviceable portion of his catalog. Number 11, The Definition. Doing his best to recreate the magic he had with the Neptunes, L is tapped in heavy with Timbo throughout the album, including joints like Headsprung, Can't Explain It, and Feel the Beat. Unfortunately for all parties involved, including the listener, the project doesn't really have any life to it. Cool J sounds uninspired, and Tim was struggling with the replay value behind the boards, words I thought I'd never say. Can I even say this part without getting canceled? The only part of the album that we can look back on positively is his collab with Robert. Yeah, that one. You know, Joe also did his thing on Shake It Baby, but I'd be lying if I said it sounded like L even wanted to be in the studio. We understand if the titles were a bit misleading, but The Definition would be L's 10th studio album, not the previously released 10. Essentially doubling down on his stance as the greatest rapper of all time, Cool J's double-digit entry into a catalog nearly 20 years in the making sounds fatigued and obligatory, like a sprinter limping across the finish line. Aside from his work with Mr. Serving a Life Sentence, L doesn't tap any A-list features for this one. When factoring in unorthodox masterpieces like The College Dropout and Mad Villainy, James just sounds completely disconnected from the culture and music he helped to get off the ground nearly 20 years earlier. The quality that made his 90s run both prolific and fruitful was the ease in which he could code switch. Every release didn't sound like Hey Lover, nor did it sound like 4321, but the challenges he went through trying to appeal to a younger 2000s audience also hammered home the idea that at a certain point in your career, you just need to feed the fans who've been with you the longest. Number 10, GOAT. Literally credited with popularizing the acronym, Cool J's 15-year run had demonstrated more than enough to back up his claims as being the game's greatest. I mean, how many rappers do you know securing their first chart topper more than a decade and a half into their careers? Now narrow that down to people who did it before L, and you'll find there were none. Reuniting with track masters on Forget About It, the gang's all back, minus Cannabis and Master P, on this unofficial sequel to 4321, more on that in a minute. Jay's 8th studio album had a respectable mix of past present, and future hip-hop legends converging to meet in the middle. Not only will we get an appearance for the ages with Snoop touching down on You Can't Fuck With Me, but we'd also get a Hungry Ja Rule on the precipice of global stardom with Back Where I Belong. It also never hurts enlisting Prodigy with Havoc behind the boards on Queen's Is. DJ Scratch would deliver a flurry of concise and deliberate beats with Hello, Can't Think, and Homicide, but all of them sound like stale products of their time. That's not to say all of Scratch's collabs with L missed the mark. You and Me with Kelly Price and the eponymously named LL Cool J with Candace Love have done a much better job standing the test of time. Critics of the project did pick up on something very telling in regards to his demeanor. Smith's defensive, almost peacock-like nature in packaging his legacy for a younger audience. It ties into the aspects of needing other people to assign you a title. It was an audible demonstration of why being the self-proclaimed greatest doesn't hold the same gravity or allure. But that begs the question, in an ultra-competitive sport of ego like hip-hop, where you need to be dead in order to receive your flowers, how can the game's living legends receive the praise they're long overdue for? Answer? Culturalist theory and its every elusive super thanks button. Nah, no really though. We've been able to establish a much more comprehensive back and forth dialogue between the older generations and newer audiences by highlighting our shared interests. Maybe if we set the precedent now of giving our pioneers their flowers while they can still smell them, the inherent need to die to reach hip-hop heaven will slowly but surely fade away. We've had more than enough discussions to know there will never be a definitive, all-encompassing GOAT figure, but his case was solid enough 23 years ago to warrant this album, and it hasn't crumbled. Hence such a highly requested deep dive into his catalog. I guess sometimes calling yourself the GOAT works after all. Number 9, Todd Smith. Going further and further down the rabbit hole of radio-friendly pop cuts, Cool J and J-Lo wanted to make another All I Have so badly that they heard Jermaine Dupri's unimaginative flip of looking for the perfect beat and thought to themselves,
I can fix that.
Funny enough, the song was initially made with a Fergie feature in mind. Miscommunication regarding the terms of payment led them to change the feature but not the beat. With the two embodying completely different styles of music, did we really need 20 years of hindsight and reflection to know that J-Lo over African Bambaataa was like oil and water? Even Hype Williams couldn't spin a classic video from this one, and he's almost as automatic as the Human Nature flip. Perfect segue into that So Sick remix. We usually don't cover bonus material, but with a song this dope and a project so one-sided, it'd be a crime if fans didn't know to check for it. Like we've said before, knock on wood, we've never come across a poorly utilized Human Nature sample. Let us know down in the comments if you've ever heard a case where the producer shouldn't have gotten clearance. The R&B talent on the album didn't come to play. Performances from Genuine, Lyfe Jennings, and Tierra Marie would have modern listeners convinced they clicked the DJ Khaled album by mistake. Got to give another shout out to Poke and Tone. Favorite Flavor turned out to be what we thought Control Myself would sound like. But can you guess our pick for the clear-cut best song to grace the track list? If you guessed Best Dressed with Jamie Foxx vocals and Neptune's production, then you might just have a CT ear for music. Still in the midst of a briefly exercised retirement, Sean Carter would notch some writing credits alongside Cool J and Pharrell. Are we the only ones just realizing how we missed out on a Jay-Z and Jamie collab for the better part of 2 decades? Number 8, Walking with a Panther. In perhaps the first mainstream case of success leading to failure, Cool J's third LP saw Dwayne Simon being the only holdover member of the LA Posse willing to work on the project. Following the unprecedented success of Bigger and Deffer, the Posse wanted a pay raise for their contributions on the groundbreaking work. However, Def Jam refused to restructure their contract. In a move that would have made the 2012 NFL ref lockout proud, the label attempted to circumvent their losses by giving LL and Dwayne the keys to production, sprinkling in contributions from Rick Rubin, the Bomb Squad, and DJ Cut creator to Stop the Bleeding. Needless to say, the Posse's absence was felt throughout the cassette's 84-minute runtime. No, that's not a typo. The album would go on to move another 1 million units, giving Smith his 3rd straight platinum record, but even songs like Jinglin' Baby, It Gets No Rougher, and Big Ol' Butt couldn't make up for the void left from his previous release. The brightest silver lining off the project had to come from the lead single Going Back to Cali. Although not directly connected to the song of the same name from Biggie, it would draw influence and comparisons nonetheless. Songs like Clap Your Hands, Big Ol' Butt, and Fast Peg would struggle to get those cringy one-liners across. But the album's biggest failure can be heard in its airballed attempt to recreate I Need Love. You're My Heart might have been able to copy the slower tempo and vulnerable subject material of I Need Love, but it didn't have the breakout track's organic delivery and one-of-a-kind atmosphere. The Nitro record would get the wheels in motion for a tour of the same name, a tour that would include opening acts like NWA, Too Short, Slick Rick, Big Daddy Kane, and yeah, De La Soul too. Is it safe to assume the tour was better than this album? If you found yourself in attendance, be sure to let us know down below. Number 7, 14 Shots to the Dome. Following in the footsteps of Walking with the Panther, Cool J's comeback needed a comeback after the less than stellar reception of 14 Shots. During the formative years leading up to the East Coast versus West Coast beef, Smith would split his time in several NY and California recording locations. Fans didn't hear the split though, accusing L of selling out and adopting the sound of gangster rap peers like Ice Cube and Cypress Hill. Admittedly, for production that wasn't particularly ear-grabbing and for flows that weren't compelling. It's not necessarily that the production wasn't solid for its time, more so that the various input from producers like Marley Marl, QD3, and DJ Bobcat didn't mesh well at all, and this follows a tape that was damn near 3D printed for LL with Marley Marl in the driver's seat behind the boards. The track Backseat would be sampled on Monica's debut single Don't Take It Personal, becoming a major hit just a few years after L's record was panned by critics and consumers alike. What did Hov say?
I sampled your voice, you was using it wrong. You made it a hot line, I made it a hot song.
Reading some of the reviews for the album, you would think these critics had a lifelong vendetta against Cool J, with one writer stating he flunked his follow-up because he couldn't figure out how to put success and rap together. He would also go on to attribute the project to L's need for validation from dudes hanging out at check-cashing places. While we would more or less agree with the latter point, the notion that success and rap were disjointed concepts in Smith's repertoire couldn't be further from the truth. By '93, we had L's classic count hovering around 3 projects, so with the exception of Walking with a Panther, the Queens native undoubtedly had the Midas touch. Despite only being a year older than Ice Cube, Cool J's style and subject matter were being lumped in with transitional artists like Run DMC and Beastie Boys, while Cube was ushering in new voices like Tupac and Scarface. We covered the concept before when talking about Michael Jackson's struggles pre-Off the Wall, but artists being introduced so early means that not only are they often victims of trial and error methods, but their audiences usually struggle to age with their music, leaving 14 Shots to suffer from the monumental standards he had set for himself at the time. Number 6, 10. Earning mixed reviews at the time of release, one aspect of the album we appreciate from the outset was Cool J's willingness to step outside his comfort zone. Smith could attest that you just can't please everybody. While some critics called the album his best work since Bigger and Deffer, others said he sounded a little too self-satisfied. We would say the truth lies somewhere in the middle, leaning more toward the strengths of the project. His work with the Neptunes on songs like Love You Better, Clockin' G's, and You Should sound refreshing and youthful in ways we haven't heard since his '87 LP. And while we love the surprise factor of Cool J and Pharrell's chemistry, if there was ever a song a producer should have squirreled away in the vault, it was Niggy Nuts.
Pause, bro.
Does their unexpected chemistry speak more to the idea of the Neptunes being sonic skeleton keys, or to L's longevity and ability to adapt? Sound off in the comments. One of the ills this project suffered from the most was pacing and sequence selection. Bringing the album to a close, L decided to lean into his more sensual side on Mirror Mirror just for his grandma to make an appearance by the end of the track. Big Dog, if you're watching this, please just help us understand the thought process behind that one. I know Big Mama would be the actual closer for the album, but if you were going the sentimental route, you should have moved Love You Better around. It would have been a better closer, and it could have doubled as the kind of wholesome love song grandma wouldn't ruin. Number 5, Phenomenon. Coming off a wave of momentum so strong that he could add 3 recent tracks to a greatest hits album, it was looking like Cool J was spamming cheat codes by this point. Sporting executive production from Puffy during the Shiny Suit era, Phenomenon is certainly J's most blatant copy and paste rollout to date. Following the formula he would find unanticipated success with Mr. Smith, the Def Jam frontman would blend classic R&B samples with trademark up-tempo delivery in an attempt to capitalize off the proverbial gold rush. That's not to say Phenomenon doesn't have anything to offer in its own right, just that musically it overlaps its predecessor in a lot of key areas without really improving upon any of it. The title track is the embodiment of the if it ain't broke don't fix it approach to 90s hit making, while staples like Starsky and Hutch, Don't Come Too Soon, and Candy do just enough to convince audiences L still has something innovative to offer. 4321 has to be one of the most unhinged hits to come out of the decade. Not only would L get out-rapped by 3 different artists on his own track, 4 if you count the Cannabis version, but he would also spark a completely preventable beef beef with Cannabis over an arm tattoo. There are conflicting accounts from both parties. From Cannabis's perspective, he included a line in his verse that was meant to show love to one of rap's biggest pioneers. L took it as a sign of disrespect and asked Cannabis to rework his verse, and he obliged. Just for Cool J to leave his jab in anyway, although he would justify it by saying no one would know who the line was intended for until the original leaked and fans put the pieces together. This would lead to the two trading disses on Second Round KO and Ripper Strikes Back respectively. They would squash their disagreements after Cool J thanked Cannabis for inspiration on his 2000 LP Go. But y'all gotta let us know in the comments, who do you think got the better of the lyrical exchange? Also, we know No Limit was hotter than New Orleans in August, but why they put Master P on a track with lyrical heavy hitters like that? Despite not reaching the commercial heights of its predecessor, Phenomenon would be Smith's last album to go platinum at the time of this recording. However, with preceding breakout Hollywood roles like Halloween H2O, Deep Blue Sea, and In Too Deep, we don't think L lost any sleep over that. Speaking of acting, LL carved out a nice lane for himself in Hollywood. With 20 plus films and leading roles on TV, L proved more than capable of making the transition from rapper turned actor. His 1999 run was probably his best with Deep Blue Sea, In Too Deep, and Any Given Sunday. But don't sleep on 03's Deliver Us From Eva and 04's Mindhunters. Yo, what's your favorite LL Cool J movie or TV show? Let us know down in the comments. Also, if you know of any sleeper roles, don't cheat us, put us on those too. Number 4, Mr. Smith. Todd's 6th album in 10 years, Mr. Smith had us convinced that 27 was a lot older back in the 90s. Kind of like Inflation, but with more real-world implications. R&B-laced bops like Hey Lover, Doing It, and Make It Hot were masterfully balanced with heaters like I Shot Ya, Life As, and the title track. With duality that would give way to albums like Nelly's Sweatsuit and Drake's Scorpion, the first of 2 self-titled LL albums, Mr. Smith is our pick for his most cohesive and sonically appealing project. Can we also appreciate how he perfected the approach to remixing songs with the Who Do You Love version of Loungin'? Yo, speaking of remixes, how about the full circle moment that finds the I Shot Ya beat ended up in LL's hands? Originally intended for Biggie, Fat Joe's manager at the time, Chris Lighty, insisted the beat be given to Cool J instead. Fast forward to 2 separate versions being cut, and you get a subtle jab at Diddy on one hand and a launching pad for Foxy Brown on the other. With track masters producing roughly 70% of the album, critics would applaud L's sonic return to form after a poorly received trip to the West Coast on 14 Shots. With appearances from artists like Boyz II Men, Keith Murray, Prodigy, and The Emotions, L's most cohesive production meets his most star-studded supporting cast. It wasn't just critical acclaim that the album raked in though. Currently certified double platinum, this would be Jay's 3rd and most recent album to move over 2 million units, which is funny when you see it being his lowest charting album since his debut and his last entry to fall outside the top 10 before 2013's Authentic. From the highs and lows he would wrestle with as a multi-hyphenate to his brief but bright flashes of brilliance, Cool J could look like 85 Kareem one minute or 96 Magic the next. Both still serve as testaments to longevity extending beyond a performer's prime. He would secure 2 of his 9 Grammy nominations with his 95 LP, including a win for Best Rap Solo Performance for Hey Lover. Number 3, Radio. Smith's 1985 LP is in the running for most important debut in hip-hop history. Not only did it launch the career of one of the genre's biggest stars, but it served as Def Jam's first full-length album release. Layered with minimal Rick Rubin production and the enthusiastic delivery you'd expect from a high school junior, LL did the improbable. Drop a classic during an era that predated subject material. CJ, what do you mean by that? I'm glad you asked. Radio is endemic of a sound that didn't need to hyperfixate on crime capers, socio-political resistance, or conscious defining introspection. He just needed his radio. The same radio that his grandfather invested over $2,000 in. For audience members who aren't familiar with Cool J's ascension through the flourishing underground rap scene in Queens, let's get you caught up. James's grandfather, a jazz saxophonist in his own right, invested more than $6,000 in today's money on Smith's audio mixer, amplifier, and turntables. And talk about an ROI. It would be this same equipment that would see a teenage Cool J producing and mixing his own demos. Yep, the demos he would send to companies like Def Jam. You ever get to a function early and realize you're part of the setup crew? That's where Cool J finds himself with songs like Dear Yvette, I Can Give You More, and Rock the Bells venturing into uncharted territory. Rick Rubin said the whole process was done through a trial and error, and that as long as it sounded good, it didn't matter how technically wrong it might be. Further highlighting his progression on those 90s records that didn't have a formula for success already laid out. From the boombox cover art to the breakbeat production, The album is a moment frozen in time like no other. Praised for combining a varied rap delivery with musical arrangements and rock riffs, acts like Run DMC and LL would pioneer and popularize New York's rap rock sound of the mid-80s. Forming a three-headed monster with Raising Hell and License to Ill, Ruben's production style would be the lifeblood of artists like Public Enemy, Jay-Z, and Eminem. The rise of this golden age of hip-hop would spell the end of the Sugar Hill Records era, with the label's inability to see the future and adapt to it leading to their inevitable downfall. Them passing on Cool J's tape feels eerily similar to Blockbuster declining to buy Netflix. Number 2, Mama Said Knock You Out. While calling this record a comeback might be a bit of an overreaction to his previous output, we certainly understand the thinking behind it. Following his '89 LP Walking with a Panther, James Todd Smith found himself in unfamiliar territory, critical and commercial disappointment. In hindsight, it's clear the project wasn't quite as bad as fans and critics made it out to be, but it certainly didn't help that there wasn't really a blueprint to compare success to at this time. How many artists in the modern era could drop 2 classic records, followed up with a slightly below average release, and have to silence rumors of falling off? Cool J's 4th studio album sees him doing just that. 3 years removed from undeniable impact and influence, Smith was only one storied beef and one forgettable album away from the biggest regression we had heard in the industry up to this point. That regression essentially being the marker between the biggest artist in the game and the biggest laughingstock on the mic. Cool J would punch back with career-defining staples like Around the Way Girl and the title track Mama Said Knock You Out. You know it's crunch time when your grandma tells you to get the haters in check. It's not just the main attractions that have us revisiting this landmark LP. Production on joints like To the Break of Dawn, The Booming System, and The Power of God had us retaining over 70% of the album on our most recent spin. We also have to highlight L's homage to a Queens landmark that helped launch him to notoriety in Farmers Boulevard. Starting off with a bone-chilling sample of Willie Hunter's Brothers Gonna Work It Out, James enlists Big Money Grip, Bomb, and High C in one of rap's earliest posse cuts on wax. We hate to nitpick the little details, but if we don't, who will? Honestly, our main gripes with the album, the same critiques that keep this from securing a top spot on this list, would have to be milky cereal and cheesy rap blues. The former actually aging like milk, with the latter leaving us scratching our heads as to why it was included in the first place. At least it inspired Killer Mike and LP to run the jewels. It feels like we have a certain continuity going on. If we cover an artist's catalog, chances are at least one of their albums has made a Rolling Stone 500 greatest list. Well, in the case of Mama Said Knock You Out, as recently as 2020, it was ranked number 246. Do we agree with that? That's up for debate. The same debate we encourage y'all to have down in the comments below. Number 1, Bigger and Deafer. Becoming just the 4th album in the genre's history to eclipse the 1 million unit mark, Cool J's sophomore LP was certainly bigger and deafer than its predecessor. Littered with innovative benchmarks and trailblazing techniques, a lot of the building blocks that pushed hip-hop into a global sphere of cultural influence can be traced back to this album. With the track list accentuated by heavy hitters like I'm Bad and I Need Love, it would be easy to confuse the record for being top-heavy and lacking album cuts. That couldn't be further from the truth. While songs like Candy and the doo-wop would crack our Cool J Essentials playlist, nothing on the album screams skip me. But let's focus on some of those bigger hits we mentioned. Universally recognized as rap's first commercially successful crossover ballad, I Need Love demonstrated a duality and foresight that was decades ahead of its time. It's easy to forget just how impactful an artist James was back in his prime due to the expansive nature of his 40-plus year career. But to our younger audiences out there who can't fully contextualize his stranglehold on the game, just think of Drake before Drake. Yes, we know Aubrey usually gets comparisons to pop culture icons like Michael Jackson, but from his crossover appeal to his longevity, Smith laid the blueprint for the modern rap superstar on this '87 LP. Starting off with the album's intro, Bigger and Deafer puts hip-hop's sonic shift on full display. Not only are we getting significant upgrades in instrumentation and sampling throughout the project, but Cool J's new and improved flows and cadences would lead you to believe a lot more than 18 months had passed in between releases. These changes also signified a noticeable increase in explicit subject material. It's almost like seeing the difference between the NBA before and after the three-point line. A literal game changer. On the doo-wop, James shouts out his DJ cut creator, but make no mistake, LA Posse should definitely be getting some love for the way they flip the moon glows over and over again. When we say innovative, we mean pre-Bomb Squad sample. That's okay, definitely a video for another day. Let's Get Ill sees LL showcasing the lyricism that would allow I'm Bad and I Need Love to coexist. Bigger Panther and Deffer ultimately shines through such a prolific and versatile era of rap, not just because of its commercial success, but because of the ingenuity James employed at every turn. Not only would the album set the stage for the genre to transition from group acts to solo stars, but it would cement itself as hip-hop's most overlooked and forgotten classics. Fam, you should know the drill at this point. Let us know your thoughts down in the comments. Are we spot on? Do we need to get our ears checked? Share the ranking with some like minds and check out other legendary deep dives right here. It's your man CJ Williams for CT, signing out.